Alrighty, folks, what's going on? This is Matt here for Dark One Linux Tech Gaming, where this is the fusion of Linux technology and gaming, and we are looking at videos that I always find interesting. Why people switched to Linux from Windows or Mac OS, or for some even BSD, etc. Or just in general, why people make the switches in their technology that they do. Now, I haven't really reacted much to in the way of like Mac OS and people and switching to Windows or Linux, or people switching from Linux to Mac OS, etc. But because I'm more interested in people, why they choose Linux or why they're looking to choose Linux. So these videos always interest me. So buckle up, sit back, grab a drink, alcoholic or non-alcoholic. It's going to be a long one. So let's get into see and hear why he switched to Linux.
Alright, what's up? So I've been using Linux for a little bit more than a week now, and I've been using more specifically the Linux Mint Debian edition. And in my last video, I explained that I wasn't so sure if I wanted to stay on Linux or switch back to Windows. So today I wanted to make a video explaining why I'm actually choosing to stick with Linux, okay? And so if you're thinking about switching to Linux, or if you're an experienced user looking for a fresher perspective, then this video could be for you, okay? So let's go right in.
So right off, that is exactly why I do these reactions to people making the switch specifically. You know, there are those videos where I do clown on a lot of people because of their descriptor of how they will actually view Linux or use Linux or see Linux, etc. And just their kind of overall general approach to it. And those are usually the ulcer inducing ones, but I already like where he's going with it, and like the telling like those of us that are in the bubble, as it were, that it's okay to have people come in with a fresh fucking perspective, because it really is. Breathe new life into these things, because if you're only in the bubble and you only hear the same fucking opinions and the same fucking takes with no fresh set of eyes, then you're basically going to end up with a dead body of a project. This is why on cold cases for like the police departments and stuff, this is why they have kind of a revolving door of people that will look at the cases, because it's a fresh set of eyes, maybe a new perspective, maybe there's something we missed. Maybe Linux and maybe some open source projects and open source advocates could actually learn that that's fucking valuable. However, most of them don't actually want that. They just want that perspective, and that's it. Kind of funny how that works.
Alright, so the first point that I wanted to talk about is that Windows isn't your friend, okay? Linux is. And so before switching to Linux, more about a week ago, I've been a quite long time user of Windows, okay? And what I mean by Windows isn't really your friend is that, yes, Microsoft, they make it convenient and they make it beautiful and they have a good user interface or whatever, and they make it super easy for you to use Windows and everybody's using it. But as of right now, I've made a bunch of research in the last weeks, and
so before he keeps going, easy to use and willing to accept flaws are two different things. Because everybody fucking uses it, people are willing to overlook the flaws. And again, because it kind of like in the Linux end of the spectrum, people are willing to overlook the fucking flaws. Same with Mac OS. It works because they're used to dealing with it the way they have to. And that's just the way, that's the way it is. So that's the way they're used to dealing with it. And I rag on the Linux community all the time about this, where it's so get out of the bubble. Like, these are problems. Fucking fix them. Same with Windows. Windows has its problems. I wouldn't call the UI beautiful. You dig deep enough, you're going to find about probably 7 different UI elements from dating back probably to Windows 3.1 in Windows as far as its UI stuff. So No, I wouldn't totally agree with that assessment, but it's not universal just to Windows. It's universal to anything a large group of people will use. Windows just has the largest user group to say, so a lot of people are willing to deal with the stupid shit that Microsoft does, but people deal with the stupid shit Apple does, and various people with the Linux distros and shit, they deal with the dumb that goes on in there. So it's not exclusively to Windows, and I wouldn't call Windows easy to use. Hello, Windows 8. Hello, Windows Vista. Windows ME. So there's plenty of like, people are just willing to deal with it because it's used by, computing wise, a majority of the general populace.
Right now, I don't really like the direction that Windows is taking, okay? And so I think that soon in the future, to have a proper experience on Windows, you'll either need some sort of monthly subscription to have like Windows as a service or something, or if you don't want to pay a subscription, I think what's going to happen is that you'll need an ad blocker for the whole system, because if you don't pay the monthly subscription, then they'll show you a bunch of ads, okay? And so like this is not good, okay? This is not a good experience. This is not something that I want to experience, okay? And also Windows is already known for spying, monitoring, and collecting data from its user, and they take this data and they sell it to other companies or whatever, okay? But also think that it is going to get worse in the future because Microsoft is moving more and more into the cloud. And so more cloud means more internet connection, that means more spying, more data, and that means more ads and other things. And so for me, privacy is not a big deal breaker, but it's just that I'm spending a lot of time on my computer, okay, both for my work and my entertainment, because I'm a computer tech guy, okay? But ultimately, I don't want to rent or pay a monthly subscription to use my computer, either with my softwares or with the operating system itself. And I don't want any ads, and if I can avoid being monitored and being spied on, I don't want that, okay? I don't want that. And Linux doesn't do any of these things, okay? Because Linux is actually your friend. And yes, Linux is a little bit more difficult to use, especially if you're using the command line or something like that. And it's also more difficult to find compatible softwares. But ultimately, I feel like I can trust Linux way more than Windows, okay? And also with Linux, I get to own the software. So I think this is really cool. And the second point that I wanted to talk about.
Okay, I wanted to let him keep cooking. So the problem with Windows and the direction it's going. Hello, ads in your file browser. The problem is Microsoft is making it a worse user experience, not just by having ads, but how ads are done. This is like on Android devices, where the ads that developers will add are intentionally placed in like the middle of some type of menu, intentionally. Not down at the bottom or the top, or they'll be placed at the top as opposed to down in the bottom. Just it's an intentional shitty design that makes for a worse user experience. I see this a lot in specifically Android. A lot of music players that have like a lot of in-app stuff, but Windows is kind of going that same route. So it's making for a shittier user experience, not just from what they're doing in the spectrum. And Microsoft is making it more of a pain in the ass to do a lot of this shit offline. Like I have a Windows 11 system right here. I do not want a fucking Microsoft account. I will jump through whatever goddamn hoop I have to not have one. So right now I have a local user account. That's it. And Microsoft whines and complains that I don't have a Microsoft account. Microsoft, eat a dick. Like, seriously. it's the same thing. Like, yes, like phones and stuff. Like, there are devices that are going to require like accounts and that stuff, but it's like there's a certain level of like, where's your line? And a lot of people really don't care about a line. But for like me, it's like, I don't mind giving up some privacy for convenience. What I mind giving up is all my privacy and having no other alternative but giving up my privacy. I don't mind being the product if the product that is being offered in exchange is good. Unfortunately, Windows, well, go install Windows on a Steam Deck and see how well that works. But it is not a good product overall as like a general OS. People have just used it for so fucking long that they've been willing and learned to accept its faults and just learn to accept its faults, and that's just the way it is. Linux has its faults and it has different problems. Because it's different, people equate different with difficult. And that's not true. I do rag on the Linux community about the overall reliance on CLI and shells and all that stuff. Because I'll get the argument that the documentation, especially distros that cater to new users, like that's their demo essentially that they're pitching to, and everything's fucking CLI. And the dichotomy of this is, don't copy and paste commands from the internet. And what the fuck do we do in documentation? Copy and paste commands from the internet. So, you know, it's stupid. It really is. We shoot ourselves in our own foot. Especially in its distros and stuff that are supposed to be catering to that new user that are coming from Windows or Mac. So whatever they're coming from is they're expecting equivalency, but not the same. You have to give them an equivalency, and the help is not a pointy, clicky fucking thing on the big screeny part of the computing interaction. It's a bunch of mumbo jumbo that they're not gonna fucking know. And like, you can get into the nitty gritty of like how like something like fish doesn't exactly work the same as bash. And then you can get into the nitty gritty of like, oh, okay, so Garuda, as an example, doesn't it uses Pac-Man, but it uses Garuda TAC update as opposed to, you know, sudo Pac-Man TAC SYU, whatever. Just little things like that matter. And those create differences from a user perspective. So if someone goes in and types in, I don't know, you know, it's those use cases where you'll hear the argument that the terminal or the CLI is universal, but the fucking commands aren't. And it's dependent on the distro, the package manager, it's dependent on the shell you use, etc. So Linux has issues specifically around documentation for distros that are supposed to be focusing on the demo of new users. People who just want their shit to work, that just want their shit pointy clicky interface for everything. We don't give that a lot of the times. We fall flat on our face really, really often and really, really badly there. Especially distros like Mint, like Ubuntu, like insert 9 million other fucking new user distros that fall on their face claiming they're new user distros, but still rely on doing exactly what we tell them not to and copy and paste commands from the internet into the terminal. It's stupid. Anyway, Microsoft, it's going to the as a service. Just look at what they're doing with Xbox. Xbox on every screen. Doesn't matter if it's placed on a Sony labeled machine or a Nintendo labeled machine, or hell, maybe even insert other PC manufacturer here. It's a pain, and it's just degrading the user experience every fucking new iteration of it.
about is that Linux improved a lot, okay? Because I used Linux many times before, but as of right now, it's been years since the last time that I've used Linux. But I can tell that it improved a lot, okay? Because I remember when I tried Linux and then when I used Linux a few years ago, I had to use much more the command line, and because I was using much more the command line, I would I would always be breaking a bunch of things, okay? But maybe it's the nature of my work that changed, or I don't know. Because as of right now, I don't really feel like I need to use the command line that much as I used to do before. So as of right now, the only time that I have to use the command line is to install some sort of software that is not in the software manager, or if I need to update something or whatever, then it's kind of the only times that I have to do it, okay? And also to install some sort of driver, for example, the NVIDIA driver, I might need the command line in order to do that, okay? And another
So it's been a long time since I've done Mint. Just I have a few issues with the project, more the project management, not so much the goal of the project. Just gonna leave it at that. Um, doesn't Mint have like a device manager GUI tool to install with like drivers and stuff? So like you shouldn't even need to go to like to NVIDIA's website and download that. I mean, that's my understanding anyway. Again, I've been out of the Debian end of the sphere for so long that I'm just saying, last I knew. Anyway, um, the CLI reliance is becoming less and less and less and less, and fucking good. I have no problem with the CLI existing. I have no problem people using the CLI or needing the CLI. But the over fucking reliance on it, I do have a problem with. Especially with people like his case. As far as its necessity now, as opposed to your point of reference, I don't know how long ago your point of reference was. You just said a few years. And you didn't specifically say what distro, so I'm assuming Mint because that's the one you're on. Like, I don't like making those assumptions, but yes, things have improved. 5 or 6 years, not even 5 or 6 years, probably 4 or 5 years ago, things like KDE Discover would not work for, well, at all. Updates on like GNOME software used to just fucking hang, and you're just like, what the fuck? Why aren't you working? KDE or the Discover Store, KDE Discover, whatever you want to call it, would just fucking you wouldn't know if shit was installing or not. So they've improved a lot in those areas, which is fantastic to see. There's still more work to be done on it though. Especially when you start getting into like, oh, is it native? Is it Snap? Is it Flatpak? Is it app? Well, most of them don't actually use app image, but you get the idea. Like then there becomes that whole diatribe of nonsense that the community argues about as far as universal package managers. Let's have one standard. Let's create another.
other thing is that also play video games, okay? And when I used Linux many years ago, Proton was not available, okay? It did not existed. But as of right now, there's Proton that support more and more video games, and so that's kind of what it is. I think that Proton is a very attractive thing if you're playing video games, okay? Because as of right now, Proton is supporting a bunch of games, and it's not supporting all the games, okay? But the fact that they're supporting more and more games and it is being developed, I really love that, okay? And I can support that definitely. And another thing is that most distro, you install a distro and it comes with a lot of tools out of the box, okay? And if you need more software that is not already installed, then most distros, you can use the software manager to install what you need, okay? And yes, the software, they might not have the best name or whatever. So usually like the software, they have some weird name because usually it's some sort of programmer that create these softwares, and it's not the best looking name, I think, but I can deal with that, I guess. Another thing that would be pretty cool, I think, is that if software manager could also develop to maybe include as much free software as possible. I mean, not only free softwares, but any software that could be useful if the manager can support that. I think that would be interesting. Okay.
Again, this gets into the flat pack and all this other stuff. I'm assuming you mean not just the open source stuff, but also like proprietary apps, etc. And most people who run articles says, "Oh, it's in the AUR." Well, fuck off. Most people shouldn't be using the goddamn AUR anyway. What I will say is, it is nice to see more and more apps. Doesn't matter if they're Flatpak, Snaps, App Image. I don't really give a shit, honestly, how you install them, but it's nice to see them being packaged in more of a universal format. And there is proprietary apps. I'm looking at Discord. I'm looking at, I know there's a Spotify. I know there's other proprietary apps that are being packaged and thrown onto FlatHub and various other places for Linux specifically. And that's fantastic to see. Now, there are certain, now if you were talking strictly proprietary, it would be nice to, I wouldn't care if some of these app store, software centers, because God forbid you call them an app store. I wouldn't care if some of these had payment options. And I know App Center, which is Elementary OS's thing, does have like a, pay you kind of thing. But I do wish that there was essentially like, oh, here's the open source stuff, here's the proprietary stuff, or paid for apps, free apps, whatever you want to call it, however you want to make that delineation from a use case perspective, I think would be far better. As far as the naming convention, if you actually look at a lot of naming conventions, it doesn't matter if it's a proprietary app or if it's a open source app. A lot of them are just fucking garbage to begin with. So that's kind of, you just hear them enough eventually that they just don't sound weird anymore. So that's just, I definitely don't agree with that. Like there's some shitty open source named apps, I'm not gonna lie, but a lot of them, because they're developed in an open source model, they tend to incorporate elements of, like, the closest one I can think of right off the top of my head is like OpenShot. It's an open source, video editor. So it makes sense, but best name? Probably not. I actually, there are another example of freaking Cinelira GG. What the fuck is a Cinelira? But you actually use the app and it's just like, oh, if you take it as Cinelira Infinity, it's different because you can just call it Infinity and the thing is a video editor. Okay, cool. Awesome. So there's just, it depends on how you look at it. What I will say is, as far as switching and all that stuff, the best way, get these applications on the platform you're currently on and use them there. And then you'll become a whole lot less reliant on the apps that you will be missing, quote unquote, because you already use the alternatives on the other fucking platform. So essentially you're making the baseline OS just matter a little bit less, but you're getting the benefits that you get from having that open source style based, open source base OS, a little more control, less ads, less spyware, etc. So that's kind of my take on that.
The third point that I wanted to talk about is freelancer and creator. And for me, it's quite easy to switch from Windows to Linux because I am an online entrepreneur, okay? I am self-employed. And so that means that I'm quite independent and I'm not bound to any companies or boss or co-worker or anything. So in my case, that means that I can simply choose the tools that I want. I can simply choose the softwares that I want. The only thing that I really need is that I need to get the job done. Okay, so that's the only thing that I really need. And so, for example, I know that Adobe softwares can be important if you're in a team or if you're working in a company, because then like Adobe, they make it easier for you to have the same workflow and to use the same tool and to collaborate or whatever. But in my case, since I'm some sort of freelancer and entrepreneur, and I'm self-employed, all these things that doesn't really apply. Okay, so in my case, I can choose my own software, I can choose my own operating systems, I can choose my own tools without any external restrictions. The fourth point that I wanted to talk about is philosophy.
Again, basically what I was just saying. You don't have the restrictions from a company culture. That's more of a how do I put that? Oh, there's no polite way to put that. Companies just choose shitty software from shitty companies, and Adobe tends to be at the top of that fucking list. When Adobe tells a country, "Hey, we're not going to activate your Adobe Creative Suites anymore. Fuck off." So much for control over your software. Just saying. So that's just companies making shitty business decisions based off what they think is ease of use when it probably might really not be. And companies get entrenched into a workflow and a way of doing things, and they really, really, really like the rest of the world and people in general don't like fucking change. It's really hard for them.
Philosophy, ethics, and freedom. And one of the things that I love about Linux is the philosophy that it promotes, okay? And the philosophy is all about freedom, transparency, and privacy, and doing the right thing. I feel like everybody on Linux is kind of trying to do the right thing, if that makes sense. And most of the things that you'll see on Linux is free and open source, okay? But you see, free isn't only about in terms of cost, it's also in terms of freedom, okay? And for me personally, the main reason I decided to become an entrepreneur is for the freedom, okay? So freedom, I want it to be free. I want it to be free from cooperation. I want it to be free from having a boss. And so for me, freedom is a very important
I hate
value,
when people use freedom as a reason.
An entrepreneur in the first place.
At least
And
in this
another cool
context.
thing that I think about free and open source software is that everything is made by the community for the community, okay? And so what that means is that everything that is being created has the end user in mind, okay? Because the people, they're creating the softwares for themselves, if that makes sense, okay? And not necessarily for profits. And I think that's a big plus, because usually when money is involved, you also find some sort of manipulation, because when it is profit driven, when something is profit driven, then there's always a cost to that, and usually the cost is the sake of the users, okay? And so the philosophy of Linux about freedom, transparency, and privacy, ultimately that gives me peace of mind, and for me it's also a very important value for me, okay?
Okay. I was going to let him, within the context of what he's saying, I totally get it. The way we sell that is not the free as in freedom, free as in beer crap that we always hear from the Free Software Foundation. Like, for the love of God, I hate that fucking that selling pitch is so god awful as far as like that way of describing it. You talked about privacy and you talked about all of that stuff. Well, Linux as a whole, like the philosophical point of view, is it's not about the freedom. It's not about all that stuff. Those are ancillary words to what it really does, and it gives you, the user, as much or as little control as you choose to. That is what it does. You want a precompiled distro that has all the shit for you? Cool. There's plenty of them. You want to go build Linux from scratch and bash your head off that fucking holy Bible? Go right the fuck ahead. That is totally your call. You don't like the way a program's written, you go and learn how to fucking fix it or change that one thing that you did really, really, really fucking dislike. But that's up to you, and it lets you make that decision. You don't like an app that's shipped with a distro? I'm looking at you, certain Microsoft apps that I can't fucking uninstall, or certain Google apps that I can't fucking uninstall, or certain Mac OS or iOS apps that won't let me fucking uninstall them because they're hardwired into the system. None of that is there on a Linux system. You can if you want, but it's not there. Like, I use Garuda Linux. I don't use FireDragon. I'm a Vivaldi user. Like, FireDragon, I'm just not a FireDragon user, which is the default browser. I rip out FireDragon every fucking install that I do of Garuda, just because. So having that level of control is the way to sell it, and the way to pitch it, and the way to pitch the philosophical point of view, and stop trying to sell it as, oh, free as in beer and free as in freedom crap. That is a shitty way of marketing. And one thing I've learned about the Linux community and the Linux companies and all this stuff, they are shitty at marketing. Really, really shitty at it. And the community doesn't help by latching on to whatever insert fucking foundation here says is the marketing pitch, instead of looking at the context of what they're marketing and finding a better way to sell it. And the best way to sell it is, if you're going to talk privacy and all that stuff, just sell it to a user as, how much control do you want on your system? That's all it boils down to. Control. Me, I'm a pragmatist when it comes to my shit, so I don't care. I'll use a precompiled distro every goddamn day of the week. I've done the right way for Arch. And no thanks. What did I gain from that half an hour experience? Other than reading a fucking wiki. And then doing it again and not caring about the wiki. You know, you can call it learning. Cool. The Arch way isn't always necessarily the only way. There's the Linux from scratch, there's the NixOS, there's other, insert 15,000 other distros here. The point is, you decide. Control what you want and leave what you don't care about. So for me, as a pragmatist, whatever gets a system up and running the quickest has a more controllable base that I can determine. If I don't like something, like as the example of ripping out FireDragon, that is what users can understand and get behind, especially people coming from the other systems. That's not what we sell, and that's not how we sell it. And it's to our fucking detriment every time, because people don't care about philosophical stuff. I'm talking, there's a group that does, but I'm talking about, there is a group, you're talking like 0.001 of the population that care, hardcore care about that. The other 99.99999% give two shits about a philosophical view of a tool. They care is, does that tool do its fucking job? But if you can sell them to determine how that tool is controlled, etc., that's a different story. It's about the pitch and it's about the sell. And we suck at it in the open source community.
The fifth point that I wanted to talk about is cost effective. And just like I said before, yes, Linux and other softwares are free and open source. And as an online entrepreneur, I have to be careful about my expenses and the money that I spend, okay? And using free and open source software can be a cost-effective solution because yes, free here kind of have two meanings, if that makes sense, okay? There's the free related to freedom, but it's also free in terms of money. So if you're trying to avoid monthly subscription, or if you're trying to save money, then free and open source software can be a solution. But you see, it's not only free, but you actually own the software as well. So by owning the software, it won't disappear tomorrow, even if you stop using it, okay? And to be honest, I think it's quite amazing. And so yes, free and open source software are free, but ultimately, I haven't done it yet, but I would recommend donating and contributing to the project and the software that you're using, simply to support the developers and the community. Okay, I haven't done it yet.
I was waiting to see if you would get into that. So cost effectiveness. Again, I'm not one to beat the, oh, you're poor, you like don't use it. Look, that's not what I'm gonna be saying. But what I will say is, if you assign a value to the software that you are using, and it's open source, free and open source, floss, insert fucking whatever random collegiate combined letters you want in that, if you're using it and you find value in it, contribute. How you contribute is totally up to you. Money, bug reports, time, development, whatever. Give something back. For me, I'm not a coder. I don't want to be a coder. I have no interest in fucking programming. But the stuff that I find convenient, the stuff that makes my life easier, the stuff that allows me to do the things I want, have the level of control I want, etc., I've donated to. I've donated to Garuda. I have donated to other projects. I've paid for the Ubuntu subscription, quote unquote, as some people would complain about when you go to download their ISO. I've donated to open source projects. I've donated to OBS. I've donated to Krita. I fucking bought Krita on Steam. Like, there's ways. Hell, yeah. I bought Krita on the Windows Store. I don't own shit on the Windows Store. For the one Microsoft account I do have, only so I could support the project some more. Darktable I've supported. There's been a Chimera OS I support as I believe a Patreon currently. I'm trying to remember how I currently have that. But support the software in any means you can. Time, effort, money, energy, whatever. That what you determine how you determine the value is up to you, not just from a monetary point of view. So I always find it annoying when people talk about it's free. Yes, it is free for you to download. You have total control. If you want to stick on this one fucking version of this one fucking app for the rest of eternity, you can. If you want to install a system, never update it, go right ahead. And that is totally your call. And it allows you to do that. There's no forced updates. There's no, hey, we're going to restart your system. And no matter how much you tell Microsoft to go fuck themselves and you tell it to delay it a month, every fucking time, eventually it's going to update. Linux doesn't do that. So how you determine what the value is totally on you. But assign a value to it. Again, from time, effort, energy, financially, whatever. That's for you to determine. But if you find value, show the things that you find value in, the proper value that they add to your life.
Yet, because I'm quite new into the community and and I wanted to try Linux a little bit before. But in my case, I can afford to pay for my softwares, and so donating and giving money to the softwares that I use is definitely on my to-do list, okay? But you see, like, I'm going to donate money and give money not because I need to, just like you would purchase a certain product or something, but I'm going to donate money because I'm free to do it, okay? I want to do it, I want to give money, I want to give money, and so I'm free to do it. And so I think that makes a whole difference. Now the sixth point that I wanted to talk about is web apps, okay? And we all do different things on the computer, and depending on your needs, I think that most people only truly need a web browser on their computer, okay? And today, I think that it is becoming easier and easier to do everything that you need using a web browser, okay? And obviously, Linux have web browser. And so, for example, what I mean by that is that if you're trying to create a design, for example, instead of downloading softwares directly on your computer, you can use web apps that you can use using web browser, okay? And so instead of using GIMP or something like Photoshop or any software that you might download, what you can do is find website and web apps like Photopedia and Kittle and Microsoft Designer that you can simply use inside a web browser. And so if you're looking for a bunch of apps on your computer, well, what you can do is simply try to replace everything with web apps, okay? So in conclusion, if you're thinking about switching to Linux, I would recommend that you find a distro.
So the short version of web apps is if you're in the Linux community and God forbid they fucking tack on Chromium or sorry, not Chromium, you know what I mean? It's a framework. But God forbid if they tack on and make it a fucking Electron app because it's the end of the world that uses 2 gigs of RAM on a 64 gig system. Shut the fuck up. Yes, web apps are fantastic. 90% of people don't give a shit about locally installed apps. Just go and look at why Chromebooks are so fucking successful. Most mom pops and idiotic people who shouldn't probably be using technology need a fucking web browser. That's it. They don't need locally installed apps, etc., etc. So, some people will take that to, heart and whatever. That's up to you. Really don't care. As far as overall, I have Electron apps that I use on Linux, and I use whatever the fuck you want. But as an alternative, yeah, Photopea is great. There's other web apps and whatnot that are totally fine to use. Like if that's what helps you get over the gap of what you need, then cool. Like, I don't know what else you want me to fucking say. Other than that. So, if you're looking for sympathy for the Electron people who are going to cry and bitch about that, all I'm going to say is, there's plenty of other fucking frameworks, or go fucking install another goddamn app that does something similar. You want choice, go fucking exercise it.
That has everything that you need out of the box, if possible, okay? Because ideally, I think that you want to avoid installing things manually, okay? So in my case, when I installed my distro here, I had to install the NVIDIA driver manually, and I had to use the command line to install a bunch of things. But ultimately, like, you want to avoid that, I think, okay? You want to avoid using the terminal. And ultimately, I think the most difficult thing about switching to Linux from, in my case, it was Windows, but it's about finding and learning the alternatives to what you're already using, okay? But once you have all these things figured out, then you're good, okay? You can simply switch the workflow that you have. For example, I was on Windows. You simply change your workflow from Windows to Linux, and you change all the application and all these things, but once you're up and running, then it's fine. And so as of right now, I've been on Linux for about a little bit more than a week. And as of right now, the only painful experiences that I had was in the very beginning, okay, when I had to install a bunch of software that I needed and the drivers that I needed and all of that. But once I've done that, then I'm pretty good, okay? I'm pretty good, and my workflow is up and running. And basically everything that I was doing on Windows, currently I'm doing it on Linux with different softwares and different alternatives. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that once in a while, you might need to use the command line to make little things, okay? And so for me, I'm okay with computers and I'm okay making a bunch of research on the web or whatever. So for me, that's something that I can deal with, but you might need to use the command line once in a while, okay? So that's pretty much it for this video, okay?
I mean, generically, I'm not going to disagree. Um, Again, I find it weird that you had to use the .run probably from the video. That's a little strange for a Linux mint, but again, I haven't been on that end of the Linux spectrum for a fucking while. So as far as using the alternatives, put them on the other system so that way you can change your workflow easier when you jump over. As bad as this is going to sound for a lot of like Linux diehards, it's the apps, stupid. Like, really, that's what it boils down to. And if you can get people to be using the available alternatives, and I do like the fact you said alternatives and not replacements or drop-in replacements. Thank fucking God. And I appreciate that but those alternatives still have a different workflow. DaVinci Resolve, as an example, is going to have a different workflow than, say, Adobe Premiere. Or if you do use any of the open source video editors, they are all going to have a fucking different workflow. It's kind of like digital audio workstations. They all have a motherfucking different workflow. You look at them, Reaper is different than Bitwig, and Pro Tools is going to be different than Fruity Loop. They're all different. They all have a different way of fucking working. It's the same way with a lot of these other applications. So it's going to take time to relearn where things are, or how things are laid out, or how things are named, etc., etc. If people are still able to have the comfort of that fallback, it gives them a little, a lot of people need that fucking safety net. Some of us are a little more adventurous. That's really what it boils down to. And I think at the end of the day, if they have the safety net, but they get used to these programs prior and still have the safety net, I think they're going to be a little more willing to venture further out. And eventually they'll, spread their wings, as it were, or go and do that, triple Lindy flip or whatever for a trapeze act kind of deal. That's what it boils down to. They'll eventually get there. Some people, it's a short trip. Some people, it's a long trip. But as long as they are willing to do that. And as far as choosing distros, that is where the Linux community needs the help. Take your preconceived notions of what the quote-unquote right distro is, shove that shit to the side. What is the goal and the usage of the system for that new potential user? And how much is their technical knowledge for it and willingness to use the technical knowledge? Or how much are you going to be the support? So don't be the jackass and tell someone to go install fucking Gentoo if they fall more into the, I probably should be using the pointy clicky fucking interface type. And we have that far too often. So I agree with most of what he says. Again, so some of it's just more, I haven't used certain things like Linux Mint for a long time, so I can't specifically speak on it, but my understanding is X, Y, and Z on certain things over there and whatnot. But generally, other than the way we sell it and within the confines of what he was saying and the context, I do agree. You know, the privacy and the freedom and cost and all that stuff. And I'm glad he mentioned donating. It doesn't matter what, you know, donations are a sign of value to these projects, because I personally view them as products. That is more for my own mental capacity to understand and how I view this stuff, because I view this from a consumer mindset. You might view it from a developer mindset. You might view it as, you know, community mindset. You might view it from a time, from a time aspect, however you want to view that value. So again, for me, probably 95% I'm going to agree with, and that 5% is just more content, like the way it's, I agree with the context of it, just not the way it's being packaged necessarily. So that's really my only disagreement. So I'm glad he's being able to make the switch and having that willingness to muscle through. For some people, it would be a pain in the ass, because getting the NVIDIA drivers sometimes to run from the CLI is kind of a pain in the ass. So other than that, I got nothing else. You guys know what to do. Indigala, Patreon. I will catch you guys on the flip. Peace.